All right, welcome to my first podcast episode. In this one, I attempt to explain Bitcoin to my son. What was made, it made it a little difficult that there's some holes in my knowledge and stuff, and I don't claim to be an expert on the topic. It's just a dad having a conversation with his boy about something he thinks is pretty important. So, if you want to leave some feedback, probably the most useful feedback I could get from you would be what did you dislike the most? It gives me some focus as to what to improve. But either way, enjoy it. Okay, so Bitcoin.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Bitcoin consists of, I think, in my head anyway, I've broken it down into three parts. There's a series of computers all running a particular software which communicate via a protocol. They communicate. That software establishes an appropriate means of communicating with one another. So there's a network of computers all connected running an appropriate software. Okay?
Yeah.
There's a ledger. So each one of those nodes, each one of those computers nodes, can choose to maintain the entire ledger, meaning the entire record of all Bitcoin transactions conducted back since it was created back in 2008.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So the entire record of every Bitcoin transaction is currently available and can be audited. You follow what I'm getting at? And then, what was the third thing? So we got the nodes, the network.
And a ledger.
Oh, and the rules. The
Oh,
rules
yeah.
by which we can determine whether a particular transaction is valid or not. All right. So the interesting thing about the network, say, is there's no central central server which these guys are communicating with. Like when you go to a website, you're communicating with a particular server, and everybody who's talking to that website has to go fetch the data from a particular server. You follow what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And the internet in general does have this hub and spoke model where all the, like, we connect to our internet service provider. You follow what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it does ride on the back of the internet, which is itself sort of centralized into these ISPs. But the Bitcoin network, I don't need to communicate with a central authority in order to connect to a peer. So it's a peer-to-peer network. You follow what I'm saying?
Yeah, like old community, like networks.
I guess like the old intranets and stuff. Is that
Yeah.
what they were?
Yeah, or like
Did they have
even like plants do that.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, industrial Ethernet, where they all connect to one another.
Hmm.
Each one of the devices are individually connected.
No kidding. So what now? So like industrial plants, like they connect independently, or you know what I mean? There's not like a central. Typically, there wouldn't be a central server, which is
There usually is.
okay.
A lot of times it's actually a PLC.
Well, in Bitcoin, there is no central server. They're all essentially peers, right? And so they this poses a few problems. Like if all the data was going into a central location, it'd be easy to manage it and distribute it. You follow what I'm saying? But Bitcoin, because it's all peer to peer, I can come and go as I please. I can go onto the network and drop off. My node can come on and drop off. You know what I mean? And so the network needs to be redundant or robust enough to be able to handle individual nodes coming on and off. So when a node comes on, it establishes a communication channels with, say, 10 other nodes. You know what I mean?
No.
No, like so. In a peer-to-peer network, or at least in Bitcoin, as far as I can tell, if I'm a node, I start running the software. It immediately starts looking over the internet for 10 10 peers in which to connect.
Okay.
And we share information between the 11 of us or 10 of us.
Yeah.
So when any node can generate a transaction and broadcast it to all of his friends, all the 10 nodes that are attached to him that he's communicating with. And those transactions just propagate through the network that way. So I broadcast my transactions to 10 nodes, and they broadcast them to 10 nodes, and that way it kind of sort of propagates through the network.
Okay. Yeah.
So, and each one of those can determine whether that transaction is valid or not, and reject it. You know what I mean? And so that's how the transactions get broadcast through the network.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's not one central location.
Yeah.
Trickles, sort of.
Now, you would think that would be somewhat insecure because, like, I could send a valid transaction to you saying that I gave you, or I could broadcast a valid transaction that I spent 5 Bitcoin. You know, I paid Andrew 5 Bitcoin, right? And I could say that I sent that same 5 Bitcoin to someone else. And I could broadcast both those transactions. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I could broadcast both those transactions. So how do you know which one is valid? You know what I mean? And they solved this, whoever the Satoshi fellow was, solved this in a pretty ingenious way, I guess. I don't know if this was well known beforehand, but essentially, if you're a node, you would just take the first one you got. That's the valid one. Like if somebody tries to spend that same Bitcoin after the fact, you're like, well, that's already spent. Right?
Yeah.
But I could have broadcast that to 10 other nodes. And so now there's some confusion as to which one came first. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's when these miners come in. And all miner is like this special node. Actually, it's not even special. It's somebody who wanted to dedicate the appropriate resources to do it effectively. But it's really just a node. Like you could run I guess the standard software is called Bitcoin Core. And I believe you can just mine with that. You can just fire up your desktop and start mining. Of course, you have no chance of ever producing any Bitcoin, but you could do it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And because it's become somewhat lucrative and so competitive, the people who do this professionally, like they mine the Bitcoin professionally, have upgraded to the point now where the computers that they run to mine the Bitcoin are specifically designed, or down to the silicon on the chip, to mine Bitcoin. So they can take, they're extremely efficient at mining the Bitcoin. Now, what does it mean to mine the Bitcoin? Essentially, you've heard of the term blockchain?
Yeah, I've heard of it. I don't know what it is.
So, I don't think so. In the white paper that established Bitcoin, the term blockchain doesn't appear. I think he called it a time chain. I think that does appear. The words time chain, but essentially, Bitcoin are those transactions that have been disseminated across and have been propagating through the network are collected by these nodes who are in the contest to create the next block. They're called miners. That's what a miner is. Mm-hmm. They collect all the transactions that they can choose which transactions to include, which in the block that they intend to create. Okay, so they assemble a bunch of transactions, then they take some data from the previous block, right? And they assemble all the transactions that they would like to include in their block, and this data from the previous block, You know what I mean? Because everybody's got a copy of the ledger, so they take the data from the previous block. You follow what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Plus whatever transactions they would like to include in their next block. Plus a number called a nonce. It's literally just a number. I don't know. It's an 8-bit number. It's not an 8-bit number. It might be 64-bit number or something. I don't even know how big it is. But it's just a number. And it's a guess. So they accumulate their transactions that they would like to include. They bring in some data from the previous block and this number that they guessed.
Mm-hmm.
They run it through an algorithm called a hashing algorithm. And a hashing algorithm is like it's an example of what's called a one-way function. Meaning it's easy to run it through the algorithm and get an output. It is
difficult.
It's damn near impossible
in reverse
to run it in reverse. To take the output and decide what the original information was. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And the output from that is another number. It's literally a number. And if that number is low enough, then it can be the next block. That's the next block. Okay?
Why?
What's that?
Why does it matter if the numbers are low?
Because as the numbers decrease, as the required number decreases, the difficulty in finding that a collection of transactions, data from the previous block, and your guess becomes more and more difficult.
Yeah.
There's fewer and fewer chances for that to occur.
Yeah.
So that number actually gets adjusted every so many blocks. And so it comes out to like every couple weeks or something. That number gets adjusted so that on average, a new block is created roughly every 10 minutes. So if the average time between blocks is, say, 20 minutes, then the next time it gets adjusted, it'll be easier so that more blocks are found, more quickly. You follow what I'm saying?
Not exactly, no.
Okay. So did I lose you at the miner?
A little bit, yeah.
All right, so miner's sitting here taking all of the transactions and whichever one he chooses to include in this block. He takes some data from the previous block, and this number that he guesses, runs it through the hashing algorithm, and the output is a number. If that number is low enough, he successfully found the next block, and he broadcasts that block to the network. Okay. Now, the number that he has to be below changes every couple weeks. Every so many blocks, that number, to be a valid block, it gets adjusted depending on how many blocks are being produced, at what rate. And if it's roughly every 10 minutes, it won't get adjusted. If it's every 15 minutes, the next adjustment will make it easier to find blocks. If it's 7 minutes, the next adjustment will make it harder to find blocks. That way, as technology's advanced and as more miners try to get in on the contest, the average time between blocks can be maintained at roughly 10 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a new block every 10 minutes. So why would you bother? Mining is, so you got to plug this into a wall. You got to consume a bunch of electricity to make all these guesses. Some of these miners, these special miners, are making trillions. Like per computer, it's like maybe trillions of guesses per second. Okay. It's insane.
Yeah.
And it consumes a lot of power.
I'd imagine.
Yeah. So that is kind of like the cost. But why would you do that? Because you got to pay for the electricity that you're pumping into this thing, or find some free juice somewhere. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So to reward the miners for finding the next block, in the initial, in the initiation of the Bitcoin blockchain, there's this concept of what they call a Coinbase, which is brand new Bitcoin that's created at the time of the block creation and given to the miner, to the node who won the contest.
Oh,
Okay?
yeah.
It started out at 50 Bitcoin. The first block was mined at 50 Bitcoin. And then after so many blocks, I don't know the number, which roughly comes out to every 4 years, that number gets cut in half. So it started out at 50. 4 years later, it was at 25. 4 years later, 12 and a half. We're currently at 6 and a quarter. And like next month, it'll be down to 3 and an eighth.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess next month, roughly.
Oh.
And so that's a big time. That's a time of lots of anticipation because there's going to be half of the newly created Bitcoin on the market. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so in the last 3 times this has happened, it's coincided with a large price spike, followed by a giant crash.
Okay.
However, the crash typically levels out higher than the previous crash. Yeah.
Is that because of the fact that it's
know.
half?
Well, no, because from what I can gather, there does tend to be people they learn about Bitcoin, and we'll get into this, but they decide to stay. They buy their Bitcoin or acquire their Bitcoin however they want, and they just hold on to it.
Oh.
You know what I mean? So as it's riding to the moon, as the price is riding to the moon, a certain percentage of those people
Yeah.
bought it and they don't intend to sell it. But then when it knees over and crashes down, all the people, they're all in a panic to sell. Like there's a bunch of speculator type people who hadn't really bought in onto like the real functionality of the Bitcoin or the real promise behind it, which we'll get into. But they just see the price on its way down and they sell, they panic or they sell. Maybe it's an emotional sort of thing.
Yeah.
So the miner mines the next block. Oh, and so how does that relate to the double spend problem? Like, why can't I double spend? This is me speculating a little bit, but I think it's right. It seems right. So this miner, say I sent those 2 transactions. If that miner got both of them, he would have rejected one of them. So only one of them is available to go into the block. You see what I'm saying? If that miner received both of my I gave you 5 Bitcoin and I gave Joe Blow 5 Bitcoin, and I broadcast both those transactions, right? And because they're just propagating through the network, they may find that miner who won the contest may have received both those transactions. And if he did, whichever one he got first, he rejects the other one.
Oh. Yeah.
So he's like, that's not a big deal.
Okay.
Okay? What if he didn't? Maybe he just got one of them.
Yeah.
Well, that's the one that makes it into a block. The other one is going to get rejected. Once it's in the block gets broadcast out to the rest of the network. Everybody's okay. They have now a new updated list of transactions. When they get this transaction, they're going to reject it. You follow what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So the guy who mined the block decides which one of those was valid. Just kind of by chance. Like if it just happened to be the one that got there. And then I'm going to have to go explain to Joe Blow, who's going to come looking for whatever it is he paid. You know, he gave me something in exchange for that 5 Bitcoin. And we're going to have to settle up in real world space. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
All right. So that's pretty much, I don't know. Do you have any questions at this point?
It seems like it would be wise to not give out so many transactions at the same time then.
Oh, well, you mean if I was being immoral and I tried to send out multiple transactions spending the same Bitcoin?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you're going to get caught. Or only one of those is going to go through, rather.
Okay.
You know what I mean? And if I
I guess I was under the impression that somebody would do it.
So what happens, or what they suggest, each one of those blocks, so if your transaction makes it into a block, it's called a confirmation. It gets confirmed.
Mm-hmm.
You need a few confirmations. Like the standard number is 6 to have a confirmed transaction. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So give it about an hour. So if I'm like if we transacted something for some Bitcoin, we're going to give it an hour for all this stuff to play out, for all this chaos to freaking settle out, and if it's about 6 blocks deep in the blockchain, it's pretty well settled.
Yeah.
You follow what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to stand here in your presence until 6 blocks get mined. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or something like that. Or we have to have some. There's like some. Maybe it's like a what do they call that? Like an arbiter or something, where we both give like you give your goods to somebody, I give my Bitcoin to that same person, and they'll distribute it at the time, when the funds get through or something like that.
Like a middleman.
If you're going to do it, like if you're going to transact over the internet, a lot of that stuff works that way. Like PayPal, I guess. I don't know. You would think they'd have to do that.
Yeah, I guess PayPal does work that way. Yeah.
And like I think on average people are mostly honest.
That's good.
It seems that way.
That's good.
There's there are the ones that aren't, I guess. You got to watch out, I suppose. But so you'd have to arrange something like that, and then after your six blocks are mined and your transaction's good and solid and deep in the blockchain, you go on your merry way there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think that's pretty much it. And so everybody has a copy of the ledger, and the ledger is basically just that sequence of blocks and all their associated transactions. And so I can go back and on what I have on my computer, it's like a few hundred gigabytes. Since 2008, you know what I mean?
Oh.
So it's not huge. And I mean, on that thing, it took 4 or 5 days to download.
Yeah.
But imagine.
Yeah. Most people don't have a living fossil.
Yeah. Well, whatever. Anyway, so why should you care? So what's the difference here? Oh, remember we talked about sort of the value proposition of Bitcoin, what supposedly makes it valuable. In my mind, is first of all, they solved this double spend problem.
Yeah.
Where, like, every transaction, basically the entire ledger is auditable all the way back to the beginning. That's one. It's hard to do funny business. People you'll hear on the news that Bitcoin is only for money launderers and illicit activity and stuff. It's the worst. Every transaction, I can go back and look at every transaction that's ever been taken on Bitcoin.
Yeah,
it is it's the worst thing to do if you're trying to, be anonymous.
Yeah,
essentially,
every single person who's ever bought it has some record of who's bought it.
The issue, your actual identity has to be linked to the address on the ledger somehow. And so maybe if you got it, there's probably ways of obfuscating it, but that information's there. You'd be much better off with like cash or, you could launder your money some other way. They've been doing it for a while. I don't know.
Yeah,
but Bitcoin is not a great way to do illegal stuff because it's not very private, which is actually, in many people's eyes, like a downside of it. You know what I mean? Yeah. They were looking for digital cash, anonymous money, where I can transact anonymously, and Bitcoin really isn't there. Especially now, to actually purchase the Bitcoin, you have to go through a regulated exchange or know somebody, or mine it yourself, or transact in it. Like, so if I sold you something and you just sent me a transaction over the blockchain, or just sent me a transaction, like if I sold you something for some Bitcoin, that can be done somewhat anonymously. but kind of, because unless you're big, but if I buy it from an exchange, currently in the U.S., these laws require that I have to show my driver's license and all this other stuff. So my physical my physical ID is tied to all the Bitcoin I own. Which, if the government's coming after me, or if somebody wants to, the best way for them to come collect my Bitcoin would be to show up at the door with a weapon.
Yeah, that'd be tough.
Yeah. Or, if you have it on an exchange, that makes it even easier for some government actor to seize it. I mean, they just go to the exchange guy and you'd be like, give me all the Bitcoin. And what are they going to do? They're not going to go to prison for you.
Yeah.
So they just hand it over. And that's happened before. Like, they've confiscated the gold back in the 30s. It was actually illegal to own gold for, I'm not sure exactly how long that was, but anyway, we're getting off topic. But all right, so the double spend problem, the fact that the ledger is completely alterable back to the beginning. All right, so there's no, and one of the most important facts is that there will only ever be 21 million Bitcoin. There's 50 it halves every time.
Yeah.
Well, sometime I guess in like 2140, the last tiny fraction of a Bitcoin will be created. You know what I mean? And then there will be no more Bitcoin created. And if you add them all up, add all the blocks up, all the Bitcoin minted at each block, and because we know the schedule, right?
Every 4 years?
Well, not even 4 years. We know it's actually a specific number of blocks, which if a block happens every 10 minutes comes to about 4 years.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So we know exactly how many. You can just add it up, and you will see that there's going to be, I don't know, it's probably not exactly 21 million, but it might be. I don't know.
Oh.
But it's right around 21 million at least. And that's all there'll ever be. And I don't know what this guy's motivation was, this Satoshi Nakamoto guy, the person who invented Bitcoin. But it was invented, right after the banking crisis in 2008, and the financial crisis and all the bailouts and shit in 2008. So, in my mind, it holds the promise of a future where that kind of crap doesn't happen. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Everybody just has to transact honestly.
Yeah.
It seems...
That does seem fair.
Yeah.
Especially with peer-to-peer. Even with an exchange. I don't know.
Yeah. And that's pretty much it. I guess. I'm probably leaving a bunch of shit out. But
what are those, like, Bitcoin ATMs I've seen?
So, my understanding is that... I don't know, to be...
Okay.
honest, but I think that is a way around the I don't know if it's a way around, but you pay like a premium fee on those, from what I understand, and it may be a little bit more private. It may be private. It may be a way. I have no idea, to be honest with you. I shouldn't even try to ask, but I think it has. I shouldn't even try to answer, but I think it has something. It does maybe increase the ability to do it privately.
I was thinking about that.
Well, they put the block. I can buy Bitcoin on an exchange without giving up my ID, but if I want to move it off of an exchange, that's when they need my ID.
I guess that makes sense.
I don't know if that's all the exchanges, but the exchange I use, that's how they did it.
How many exchanges are there?
Quite a few, and I don't know all of them. Coinbase is the big one that I'm aware of. It's probably going to be the big one now because a lot of these big institutions are starting to get into Bitcoin, and they have this thing called an ETF. It's like the stock market. So like these institutions can buy like IOUs for Bitcoin. Like you could just buy it. You can buy and like an IOU, essentially, like a paper Bitcoin, it's not real Bitcoin, but they'll buy it on your behalf. You follow what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
These funds, and all those funds have are keeping their Bitcoin in this exchange called Coinbase, from what I understand. But there's several others. If I were going to buy, so crypto in general, cryptocurrencies in general, there's got to be 20,000 of them by now, at least. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And the thing about those that makes them kind of sketchy, in most cases, I don't know if this is true. There's 20,000 of them. I can't possibly know about all of them. You know what I mean? But in most cases, you can point to the guy who started it and who mined all of his tokens first. So he mines like 1 million tokens, and they say, "Hey guys, here's this brand new token," and they all buy it, acquire some value, and then he just sells all his tokens.
Yeah, rug pull.
Yeah, exactly.
I've heard of that.
But you can't do that in Bitcoin. You can't point to the guy who can do that. He doesn't exist. This Satoshi guy, the guy who created it, he mined the first 1 million Bitcoin, and you can still see it on the blockchain. It's still sitting on there. Hadn't moved. And he died, disappeared, something.
Oh.
There's some... Nobody knows who he is, or nobody knows for sure who he is, I don't think. Except for... It may not be one guy. It could be a group of people. Who knows?
Oh.
You know what I mean? That's an important aspect to it too.
Yeah.
There's no one to pull the rug.
It does seem wise, especially. I know as of recent there have been a lot of crypto rug pulls.
Yeah, or
The
just
famous-
shenanigans.
Yeah, famous influencers do it all the time.
The what now?
Like many famous influencers do it, or influencers do it all the time.
Oh yeah? Like what do you mean?
I couldn't think of anybody in particular, but
Like they pump up they tell everybody to...
yeah, buy their
Do they continue
fake
to have
coin.
audiences afterwards?
Probably. I don't know. I mean, I imagine a lot of them, probably had audiences that were like little kids. I remember there was this one guy who, his name is, I don't know what his actual name is. His name is iShowSpeed, but he was like sponsored by a group who were famous for doing rug pulls or something like that. And everybody was aware of it in the chat, and that made him, I mean, it didn't impact his career at all. He's very famous. So. But,
Yeah.
that definitely didn't help.
It's some people, like, if you're getting into it now and you don't know that that's a possibility, that's kind of on you.
Yeah.
And it's people are just gambling. It's gambling. It's like playing roulette. And if you're down with that, I mean, if you don't know, that's on you.
Yeah.
I mean, it's immoral to be scammy or whatever, but if I just tell everybody, "Hey guys, I'm running the casino," we don't call them immoral, really, do we? You're going to lose. The house wins, right?
Yeah.
The odds of you beating the house are pretty slim.
And when you do, they usually don't like you that much.
They kick you out and you can't play anymore.
It's not against our rules to win, but
All right, dude.
you better stop winning.
You got any questions?
No.
All right. Let's cut it off.